Productive Pastor 48, practicing an end-of-week review. What's going on, friends? Chad's back, Productive Pastor. New episode, second episode in our short series on reviews, and the reviews that I use each week to not just stay productive, but to do it in a healthy way. If you missed last episode, go back to the feed, catch it. It's about a Sunday review, and I realized like halfway through recording of it, what's actually going on in that situation is it's a Sunday preview. So we're back today to talk about the end of week review. What does it mean to close down your week, to shut down your week? You can get links to anything I talk about here and also just a little bit more content over at revchadbrooks.com/PPP/048. It's where the show notes will reside for this conversation. And what we're doing here really is it's like a 201 type of thing. It's a 201 conversation. If you're curious about what a 101 conversation might be, you can go back to the show notes, check it. There's a previous episode of the podcast where I just talk about the power of a week way back in season 1. But there's also a fantastic resource that I've developed called the Becoming Productive course. And there is so much stuff that's available in the module on the week in that course, but also, the whole second half of that course is about developing your own personal productivity system according to the year, the quarter, the month, the week, and the day. So if this is the sort of thing you need in your life, you need in your ministry, go back, check out those episodes, those older episodes of the podcast. But also, you can pick up the Becoming Productive course. It's cheap. It's $50 for 11 modules, tons of content, worksheets, additional videos, all sorts of things. So I'm going to recommend that to you. But let's get into the 201 that we're doing today. What does an end-of-week review look like? Now, remember back in the last episode 47, about the Sunday review, I really stress 3 questions that you can ask as you go to set yourself up for success during the week. It's just declaring what's the most important thing to do, what's the most important thing to finish, and what's the most important thing to start. And now here we are today in our conversation, fast forwarding out 4 or 5 days from where you planned to look back and review what you accomplished that week, but also to talk specifically about what does it mean to, shut things down and stop things for the week, because that's part of ministry as well. Ministry is a job where we have to be responsive and learning to not work, learning to not Sabbath. Those sorts of things is a difficult practice. I wrote on Twitter about that earlier this week and just shared some things I added into my life to just kind of put up a little bit of a boundary between work and not work. So we're going to cover those, 2 big topics today. So I want to talk to you about my Thursday review. Now, this is the things that I do at the very end of my day as I'm closing out my work week, but as I'm also stopping work, because those are 2 kind of unique things that are going on. Now, I did a big, huge live stream last year about how I was shutting down my work at that point in time when I was a full-time local church pastor. And you can go to the show notes. You can catch that live stream link and watch that if you want to see more of that. But really, what you have to be figuring out is how can this not be necessarily so pragmatic of a review process, but it's also about entering into that Sabbath thing. So the first question you can ask yourself is this: what helps you stop well? Now, here's the thing. If you did not set goals for the previous week, if you didn't, kind of come into it asking those questions, what's the most important thing to focus on? What's the most important thing to finish? What's the most important thing to start? If you've got no clear goals for the week, you're just simply trying to hang on for dear life, you're going to struggle to stop well because your mind is not going to feel like anything got finished. And there's something psychological about finishing. I don't know what it is, but if you're the kind of person that writes down something on your to-do list only so you can check it off later on, you might know what I'm talking about. And so you have to begin to think, what helps me stop well. And if you don't have any goals, if you don't have any things to celebrate at the end of the week to say, hey, I got this done and this done and this done, you're going to struggle to understand what stopping means for you. So that's kind of the first part of what helps you stop well is understanding, what were your goals? What were you able to do? What were you able to accomplish? The second thing you have to think about is the mental shutdown. For me, I have to physically change my office now. I talked about that in the little article I wrote on Twitter. There'll be a link to that in the show notes because I work from home. I do 98% of my work from home. If I'm not working from home, I've gone somewhere to get out of the house, to get out of my home office, to think and to write or to do some research elsewhere. But I work out of my home. And I'll be honest with you, you might have seen pictures of my home office from on the internet or on my YouTube videos, that sort of thing. I love my office. I'm not done with it yet, but I want to have a good space to work because environment matters to me. So what that means is my office is kind of one of my favorite rooms of my house. I use it for other things. And it's not like I'm going to shut the door and not step in here from, 5 o'clock on Thursday until I come do my Sunday review. So one of the things I do is I physically change my office. One of the things I used to do back when I was in full-time ministry is I cleaned my office at the end of every Thursday. I took out the trash in the whole office. I cleaned our kitchen because we were officing in an old parsonage. I did that sort of thing to reset the space. And that was there's a mental idea of shutting down, and you need to figure out what helps you mentally shut down. It might be cleaning off your desk. It might be going into the sanctuary and placing your preaching Bible on top of the pulpit, like that sort of thing. But there's going to be mental things. So that first step of understanding this end of week review really is what helps you stop well. The second thing that you need to ask yourself is this: how did you do on your priorities for the week? It goes back to that question of the three things that we talked about in our last episode. What's most important? What you finish? What do you start? How did you do on your priorities for the week? There's a little spectrum that I find to be incredibly helpful is to understand the difference between control and agency. If you've been around the podcast, you've heard me talk about this. It's a kind of a primary mental model I live with. Were you in a week where you were able to exercise agency over things? Did you have agency over your schedule, or was your schedule just like this absolute, you were just being controlled by an external force like crazy, and all you were doing was just absolutely trying to stay alive? And so when you sit down in your review, because remember, one of those things is if you don't have any way to say you have a goal, you've accomplished the goal, you're going to struggle to stop well, struggle to realize the week is ending. And so how did you do? Go through, you might have done a time audit, that sort of stuff, but, do some evaluation over what your week was like. You might want to write down a couple of notes like, hey, what do I need to change next week to give me more agency? I think that's the biggest goal that we have in some of this is there's a difference between control and agency. I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the last few months, and I'm just trying to absolutely stay alive right now. But one of the things I'm learning is, because I'm being crushed, just demolished every single time I train, I'm learning right now there are positions I can be in to where I have no control over my being crushed, and I have positions I can be in where I have a little bit of agency over how I'm being crushed. And so you might ask yourself the question, okay, what do I need to change? Because if you're getting crushed continually, if you're getting controlled nonstop, you might just have to ask yourself a handful of adjustments. Like, what do I need to change to make this easier? In jiu-jitsu, I've learned I don't want to not be facing my opponent. I want to be facing my opponent. They might still be absolutely destroying me, but if I am facing them, I'm in significant better position for what might come next. And so when we're looking at the changes we need to make, what is just that one adjustment that will help go forward? Like if you're constantly being interrupted and you're not able to focus and find any time to do the things that are important, what are one or two changes you can make to adjust that for the next week? That's always that question. What do I need to change to make this better next week? And also the second level of that is, what do you need more details on? Like you could have said, hey, this is the most important thing for me to focus on this week, but you realized you knew nothing about it. Maybe your clarity point is, hey, for this next week, this is the most important thing for me to focus on, and I can focus on it by finding out X, Y, and Z. And so what do you need to change? What do you need more details over? And that's just a good way to kind of filter how you handled your priorities for the week. Now, to prep out for coming up to your Sunday meeting or your Monday meeting with yourself, that kind of preview where you prep things out, just tighten some things together. Look through what your necessary notes for the coming week might be. What do you need to prep in order for you to start fresh as you step into the new week? Your future self will be thankful for your previous self and what you did inside of that. And so that's how you can prep out for what your preview meeting is going to be, whether it's Sunday night or whether it's Monday morning. And then final thing, I think this is incredibly helpful to do as kind of that last task as part of your Thursday or Friday afternoon work, wherever you finish your work week off, is this. What are the small tasks that you need to do real quick? I've gone through seasons where I make sure I submit all of my receipts for the week as part of my Thursday wrap-up meeting. Right now, I make sure I go into QuickBooks and do any of the necessary tagging I have to do for that. I put my mileage down if I need to submit mileage, that sort of thing. And I put that on Thursday because that's a cognitive, this is done task. And in ministry, we struggle sometimes to find this is done tasks. And I do those sorts of things as a way to wrap up and seal up my work week. It goes back into the mental idea of what helps me stop well. So those are the things to think about as you're in part of that review process. And hopefully what you're beginning to see is we are creating building blocks here. You have a beginning of the week meeting and you have an end of the week meeting. And we're going to talk about another one of those in the third episode in this short series. But you get to create what this looks like. This is completely inside of you. You get to decide, is this more of a mental model of helping me understand how I am starting Sabbathing and stopping working? Or is this more of a tactical, tangible, hands-on, what got done review? You might be inside of a campaign. You might be inside of something at church where you legitimately have a huge punch list and you're having to go through those things. Or you might need it to be something different for what this season and moment in time is. And that's what the beauty of this is. You get to decide what this looks like. You might be able to go back if, one of my coaching relationships I have with most pastors right now is we've been, defining what their core values of ministry are and how those core values are strategically aligned inside of their current ministry situation. So what you might be working on inside of this review is going back and simply saying, okay, hey, I need to make sure that I am moving towards these things that I am trying to do. I want to prioritize stuff. Like you might come in and realize, hey, I'm in a season right now where I need to be prioritizing relationships in the church. And what you do during that Thursday review is you come in and say, okay, hey, I've set the goal that I'm going to have 5 deep conversations with people each single week. How many deep conversations did I intentionally schedule and did I intentionally have with people? Okay, I'll only hit 3 of those. All right. How do I need to change? Where do I need more details? How do I need to align myself differently in order to go to this next place? And so your Thursday review is really, really flexible, and you need to be making it contextual towards where things are going. And like I said, at the very, very beginning of this does not necessarily need to be a pragmatic review of sorts, but it does need to be focused on what your core values and your strategic alignment is going. Now, if all this sounds interesting, I've got a handful of spots for one-on-one coaching opening up right now. And so if you want to talk about that, you can go to the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/048. And there's a link called Work with Chad, and you can set up a free 30-minute exploratory call talk about what some of those things might look like. But this is crucial. You need that beginning of week review. You need that end of week review. We're building blocks towards greater personal productivity here. And this is a short conversation, short and sweet, but I hope you understand how this is. We set this up as a mental model. We also can set this up as a practical model. And ideally, it's probably living between both of those two moments. But we'll come back next episode. We're talking about the end of day review. It's kind of closely related to this one, but how do we, maybe tighten that up towards the end of the day to help create those spaces, those moments of not working versus working. You're going to be more productive when you understand what those boundaries are rather than just stretching your day into constant 18-hour days. So I'm Chad Brooks. This is Productive Pastor. Come hang out with us in the Productive Pastor community on Facebook. It's the Productivity Party. And I will see you back in the next episode.